us three fundamental pillars. The first pillar is to give us freedom. First thing that you would get out of Islam is freedom, meaning that the worshipping is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The relying is only upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The asking is only upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's the only one that we adhere to, and He's the only one we obey. Other than that, we're free from any obligation that any other human being or any other entity is to impose upon ourselves. First thing is freedom. The great example of Rabi' ibn Amr radiallahu anhu, the messenger of the Muslims to Rustum, the leader of the Persians, when Rustum told him, you know what, you Muslims or Arabs were nobodies. You came from Mecca and Medina, a harsh desert that we didn't even bother to occupy. And all of a sudden you're sweeping the entire Asian part and you coming all the way to Persia to challenge the Persian Empire. Where did you get that from? What is it exactly that you want? Didn't you have enough? The answer from Rabi' ibn Amr, to make it short, was one word. We came to free the world. We came to change the world. He said, we came, إن الله ابتعثنا لنخرج العبادة من عبادة العباد إلى عبادة رب العباد. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent us so we can take the creations that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created from worshipping creations like themselves to worshipping the Creator. To take people out of the injustice and free them out of the injustice of man-made religions to the justice of Islam. لنخرجهم من ضيق الدنيا إلى سعة الدنيا والآخرة, from the tightness and the poverty and the oppression of the man-made systems into the openness and the prosperity of Islam and the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We came to change the world, we came to free the world. This is the main concept of Islam. The second concept of Islam is your relationship with values. What is right and what is wrong, and put a normative there, put a scale, put a reference there so you know what is right and what is wrong, and then you behave within that. The third main concept is how we deal with each other. How we deal with things, entities, beings, animals, most importantly, other fellow human beings out there. And no wonder the corner of Iman is that I wish for my brother what I wish for myself. That is a relationship between me and my fellow human being. These are the concepts of Islam. But before even we get into the details again of democracy in Islam, we need to understand that human rights in Islam have a major difference than any human rights or man-made law or theology out there. Meaning, they're not just rights, they are obligations. What is the difference? The difference is that I can own a piece of land. I can own a piece of property. And it's mine, and I have the right to be the controller and the owner of that piece of property. But it's a right that I can give away. I can say, you know what? I just hand it to you. Or I decline my right to use it. Someone else should use it whatsoever. Human rights in Islam, your basic fundamental rights that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mandated for you, are obligations. They cannot be taken away. I cannot say, you know what, let someone decide for me, let someone have my decision-making abilities and rights and decide for me. I give away my rights of choosing and so on and so forth. There are obligations upon the country, upon the governing system, upon everyone around me from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No one can tamper with. Example, the great ayah in Surah At-Tawbah, that the ayah of As-Sadaqat, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts the 8 venues of which tax money can be used. إنما الصدقات, the revenues of taxes for الفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل. All the 8 venues. What did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say immediately after that? فَرِيضَةٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ, an obligation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning that it's not just right for the poor, but then somebody can say, you know what, we have a war, or we have an emergency, or the king needs to be coronated and we need money for the coronation party, we need to take the no. The revenues, the taxes that you collected from people has to be spent only upon the poor and the needy and all these venues, and it's an obligation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It cannot be taken away, it cannot be altered. And so are the human rights of Islam. The second major right of Islam after the right of freedom and freeing the slaves and the freedom of man, subhanAllah, that many times is mentioned in the Quran. For example, when someone kills someone accidentally or makes a big sin and you want to expiate for it, what is it? فَكُّ رَقَبَةٍ, to free a slave. You kill someone by accident, you took a life unintentionally, so you're not going to be killed for it, yet for that life that you took away, you have to grant another life. But the slave is alive. No. Without his freedom, he's not alive. You have to give him his freedom to grant him that life. So it's فَكُّ رَقَبَةٍ. This is how Islam looks about the freedom. Even Prophet Muhammad ﷺ forbade that people call a man a slave or a woman a slave. لا تقل هذا عبدي أو أمتي بل قل هذا فتاي أو هذه فتاتي. Meaning that if you have a slave, say this is my guy or this is my girl. Do not say this is my slave. And even when people are slaves, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ mandated that you feed him, you clothe him, and you never put a workload upon them that they cannot take. And opened 1,000,000 doors for these slaves to be free. And dried the sources of which slaves are made. One of them is riba. That is the main source that people actually got enslaved. You owe money, and there's interest, it gets compounded, you cannot pay. The rule is, well, then I own your children, I own your wife. That is done, there's no riba anymore. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade it. When you enslave a free man and sell him, you are an opponent of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on Judgment Day. Imagine the severity of that. And gave the slaves the right to have a contract with their owner. You know, I'm worth $500. Alright, I'll go work, I'll earn the $500 and I'll come back and I'll buy my freedom. These are rights Islam gives. So over time, without a civil war like that, what happened here in our American Civil War, where hundreds of thousands of people were killed and tremendous devastation to the economy, slavery started to dry out, and the only source of slavery was the captives of war, and it was something that imposed upon Muslims, because if Muslims did not take captives of war, that would make nations more encouraged to attack him, and the only slaves in the world would be Muslims. Because if you don't enslave them and take these captives of war, well, the only people that are going to be captives for war are your own prisoners of war that are going to be enslaved. So all the slaves in the world will be only Muslims. And that cannot be fair. And once that stops, there's no slavery anymore, inshallah. As far as freedom. When we get to democracy in Islam, subhanAllah, as we said last time, it is one of the most important features of the definitions of Muslims. If you go to Surah Al-Shura, and the entire chapter is named Shura. Shura is consultation, which is Islamic democracy, between the two greatest things that a Muslim can do and can get rewarded for. The first thing is to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second thing is to give charity and spend from the rest that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put the Shura in the middle. وَالَّذِينَ اسْتَجَابُوا لِرَبِّهِمْ وَأَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَ بَيْنَهُمْ وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. أَمْرُهُمْ شُورَ بَيْنَهُمْ. Any matter aside from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say do and don't in between has to be consulted amongst themselves. So the collective decision of our community has to be decided by the community itself. Not that we go to every child, woman and man and ask them their opinion and try to make something of it. Our best that we see, our best people that did not lobby to get that position, people that we know that they're righteous, that they're knowledgeable, that they're competent, we go pursue them and ask him, and then they sit together and collectively decide for the best of our interest. This is a feature and a fundamental of Iman and Islam. Is that enough? No. Anyone who can claim that, you know what, I am the only one who can be your leader, I'm the only one who can decide for you, there's no one else in the nation, my decision is the right thing to do and no one else. Like every dictatorship, like every tyrant. Let's take an example of whom? Of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, in a correct hadith, mawqufan, meaning that this is what Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu said, لم أرى رجلا أكثر مشورة لأصحابه من رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. I never seen, not only that Prophet Muhammad sometimes used to consult with his companions, no, he was the most consulting man to his companions compared to anyone else. And he's the one who received the wahy. He's the one who talked to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the highest heaven. He's the one who gets the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he consults every single one. So who amongst ourselves would say, you know what, my opinion is the best and no one else? Is that enough? No. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in a correct hadith wanted to praise one of the greatest companions of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, that is Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. His nickname was Ibn Abd. لو كنت مؤمرا أحدا دون مشورة المؤمنين لكنت آمرت ابن عبد. He's talking about how much he trusts the wisdom and the character of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. He said, if I was ever to appoint anyone without consulting my companions and the believers, it would have been Ibn Abd. On its face value, it praises the character of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, but it shows the process of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, that he would not appoint anyone in any leadership position without consulting everyone else. Subhanallah. Is that maybe a tendency of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ? This is an order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we heard the verse so many times, but listen to what the verse also tells us. فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. It is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you are to be lenient with the companions of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And if you were hard-hearted, everyone would have ran away from you. You have to be lenient. فَاعْفُ عَنْهُمْ. So forgive them. وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ. And ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive them. And what? وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. And consult him in every matter that you do. An order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to Sayyid al-Khalq wa Ashraf al-Mursaleen. So who under any pretenses or any emergency of a situation can tell me that, you know what, according to the circumstances, I have powers, I have opinions, I have authority more than what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Ever. So democracy, in the sense of that we consult our matters and we choose the best decision for our well-being, is not a nafilah, is not something, it's an order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to His Messenger, and a main characteristics and a fundamental of the behavior of all believers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And subhanallah, the West, through trials and errors, came up with democracy. And it's only democracy, and through only democracy, people in the West, even in Asia, even nowadays, believe it or not, the continent of military coups, that is Africa, after they banned military coups, you see technological, you see economic advantages that are happening throughout Africa. Look in Zambia, look in Angola, look at these countries, Kenya, how education is advancing, how the living standard is advancing, how the justice, how matters of the law are all advancing, just because within the mechanism of European democracy, you have ways and venues for society to advance, because people have somewhat, whether too much or too little, but they have a say in how their lives to be run and how their countries to be advanced. Even after a 5-year term elections or 6 years election, in 10, 15, 20 years, you're going to see the advancement and people would move to improvement. The advantage of Shura, Islamic Shura, however, which is a tremendous advantage, is that actually it has in it what prevents the pitfalls of European democracy. What are the pitfalls of European democracy? Well, we decide for ourselves. They started to vote and started to use lobbying group to influence the decision of the people through the media, through economics, through false pretenses and false misinformation, that actually people started to decide about the demise of the rights that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did for every human being. What do I mean by that? There are fundamentals in Islamic law that no consultation can tamper with. Like your rights of taxes, that no government has the right to take more than 2.5% of any additional funds you have after an entire hawl, which is 10 months and a half. They cannot take any more taxes from you. Example, one of the greatest tragedies that happened throughout Islamic history is when the Mongolians, the Tatar, started to attack the Muslims. They killed 1 million people in Baghdad, destroyed every country that they went through, and the only power that there was any hope to stop him was the Egyptian army led by Saifuddin Qutuz. At the time, the judge, the faqih, was Al-Izz ibn Abd al-Salam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on his soul. He's known by Sultan al-Ulama, the Sultan of the scholars. So he comes to him and he said, I want a fatwa from you. Now we're facing the biggest danger that is facing the entire Muslim nation after almost destroying half of it in Baghdad. I want to raise more taxes so I can stand up to the Mongolians before they come and destroy us all. What will he tell him? This is the difference. No, you have no right to raise taxes. He said, but we need the money, otherwise there will not be people, there will not be a Muslim state. He said, after your richest military leader, there were Mamalik, after your richest military leader is as poor as the poorest Muslim, then you start collecting taxes from people. He said, all right, if I collected all the money from them and my richest leader is as poor as the poorest Muslim, can I raise taxes on them? He said, no, you have to start raising taxes on your military leaders first and then move to the Muslim people. Because now it's a matter of dur, it's a matter of life or death. Take that, in one of the brightest constitutional democracy in the world, which is America, somebody claims that there are weapons of mass destruction in a country that never done anything to us, never invaded us, by the name of Iraq. They go there, they kill hundreds of thousands of innocent people in their own homeland, kill about 10,000 Americans, injure 50,000 more. There is an American soldier that commits suicide every couple of hours to date, and then pillage the American treasury for $1 trillion, half of which is not even our money, it's owned by the Chinese. And then after the big fat cats, the Halliburton and the Lockheed, took our money, and the Muslims never benefited, and the average American never benefited, they come back, the same people, and under the name of fiscal responsibility, they telling our senior citizens, you know what, you have too much entitlements. You're making so much money with Social Security, you're making, Medicaid and so on. We need to fix it, otherwise we're going bankrupt. But what about the $1 trillion of that hoax that is called weapons of mass destruction? Well, oops. You cannot do that in Islam. You can do that in democracy. It happened here. So, the rights of freedom, another right. For example, in our constitutional democracy, and for those who do not know, President Obama is a constitutional professor. He was the first or the youngest man to ever to head the Harvard Review, and he's a Harvard and Columbia alumni. His business is the Constitution. He comes, and you know what? We have the scandal, this noted scandal, that they're spying on everyone. The good, the bad, and ugly. Every phone call, every text, every email is digitally saved somewhere till whatever happens, they zone on you for whatever reason and retrieve all your private transactions and calls and everything, and then they do it whatever they want. In the brightest, beacon of democracy in the world, in America. Why? It's a national security. But you know what? I'm a cab driver who had nothing to do. I don't even know how to spell politics. Why are you taping my phone calls? It's national security. The excuse. That can never happen in Islam. One of the toughest applicators of Islamic law is none other than Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu hears a complaint from some neighbors. The neighbor said, when we eavesdrop on our neighbor, we hear a girl singing inside that is not his wife, and the way he sings with her, they're slurring, they have slurry speech, so obviously they're drunk. And that bothers us. So they tell Umar al-Khattab, out of the, his himya and his stamina, against anything that, angers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he goes there and he comes closer to the house and listens and he hears singing and he hears the same thing true. So Umar ibn Khattab opens the door, gets inside, and the man there it is holding a bottle of wine or liquor. That man is finished, done, right? No. The man knows his rights that are given to him from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, "Oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, this might be a sin to you, but you committed yourself 3 sins. A, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَا تَجَسَّسُوا, do not spy upon anyone. So you allow people to spy upon me and come backbite me, and then even before you broke into my door, you listen where you're not supposed to eavesdrop and listen. Second thing, you need to knock on the doors and get the permission of people 3 times. From Muhammad sallallahu حتى تستأذنوا وتسلموا على أهلها. And when you knock on the door, you knock 3 times and you don't wait around. If people do not answer, you turn around and walk away. You did not knock on the door. The third thing is that you got inside my house without my permission, without getting my izn. You committed 3 sins. What would Umar ibn Khattab do? This is a technicality. This is a national security. How could you enemy of Allah, you committed that sin and you have the bottle of wine in your hand, and you dare tell me about Islam and Muslim? Do you know who I am? I am the companion, ana khasat Rasulullah. No, he said, you're right, I am wrong. He closed the door and walked out. That is a right from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not under any excuse, not under any circumstances that anyone would tamper with. And this is the stark difference between European democracy and Islamic Shura. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created a structure where you have rights that can never be tampered with. And then on top of that, then anything that happens, it has to be aligned with the goals of Sharia law, that is protection of lives, protection of children, protection of properties, protection of reason and religion. As long as you keep in that, you guys consult, you guys decide on whichever way you want to run your life. Prophet Muhammad even said, "Antum adra bi dunyakum." But when it comes to the deen, the main overall process and goal and ideology, that is Prophet Muhammad himself and the guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we see, and I get that questions a lot, I get it from non-Muslims and I get it from Muslims. If Islam is that great, if Islam is that wonderful, how come, subhanAllah, some of the most awkward, least developed countries in the world are the Muslim countries? I said, you should not have that question because you answered the question yourself. You said, how come Islam is that great and Muslim countries are not that advanced? Because guess what? Muslim countries are not run by that great Islam that you just testified with. Where is Sharia law truly applied? In a Muslim country nowadays, maybe somewhere in Malaysia, parts of it about the edges that got nothing to do with the poor governorship of Saudi Arabia. There's no kingship in Islam. There's no such a thing as my son should rule the world. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did not even tell the Muslims, you should appoint Abu Bakr after me or Ali. Never. The only thing that he did, he voted for him. He gave his vote when he said when he was sick, "Muru Abu Bakr falyusalli bin nas." If I'm not around, Abu Bakr should pray with the people. That meaning, when I die, my vote goes to Abu Bakr. But did he ever, in one hadith, say that he should be the Khalifa and he should be the Khalifa? Never. It is the Muslim who should decide who rules them. And Prophet Muhammad ﷺ wanted to set an example, and when they gathered in Saqifat Bani Sa'ida, all the tribes gathered and they chose Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu. Is that enough? No. In the middle of 7th century, there were opposition. Not just opposition, powerful opposition. And no one ever persecuted them, no one ever bothered them, no one attacked them or jailed them. Example, Sa'd ibn Ubadah al-Ansari. He is the master of Khazraj, a major, the 2 tribes in Ansar in Medina were al-Aws and al-Khazraj. Al-Aws, their master was Sa'd ibn Mu'az radiallahu anhu. The other one was Sa'd ibn Ubadah al-Ansari. When Prophet Muhammad passed away, he said, the Ansar, if it wasn't for the Ansar and the support they gave to the Muslims, there would have not been a Muslim state. There would have not been that success. It comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but he had a valid point. So he wanted to be the leader of the Muslims. And so Banu Zahra wanted Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, so Banu Umayyah wanted Uthman ibn Abi Affan, so Banu Hashim wanted Ali ibn Abi Talib. Everyone wanted that honor. But when it was given to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, he did not like it. So he said, you know what, I'm not giving my allegiance to Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq passed away. The Muslims again chose Umar ibn Khattab. Did he give his allegiance to Umar ibn Khattab? Never. And it was such a big opposition that Umar ibn Khattab, the most powerful man in the world at the time, would be walking and Sa'd ibn Ubadah would see him and he'd say, Hayata, Hayata, ya Umar, Hayata, Hayata, ya Sa'd. And they start exchanging harsh words against each other. Anyone ever bothered Sa'd ibn Ubadah or arrested him? Or he said that you're the enemy of Allah, or how dare you, and a matter of national security, we have to do this, this and that. Never till the day he died. That is the way of Islam. And subhanAllah, if you ask me about Islamic law, whatever little knowledge that I have, the shaitan is nothing but an excuse machine. Shaitan knows your character. If you're the most pious man, he would come to you and remind you with an ayah and flip it to an excuse so you can transgress and commit the haram against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you are the most vicious person, he would come to you and make something glitter in your eyes so you couldn't commit that transgression. And if you have people votes, and if it's the matter about consumerism, and if you have money to buy and money to vote, and we can affect the public opinion, then all of a sudden a man can marry a woman, we can sell intoxicants and drugs and things that destroy the mind and the liver and the character in the supermarkets to kids, and so on and so forth, and that's how nations are destroyed. So our democracy in Islam, with the pillars that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given to us, we need to hold on to, because it is a fundamental of our deen. And no wonder Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put it in the ayah, you cannot give up salah. And imagine if there's no charity in the world. Imagine if we are not allowed to get the reward of charity in the world. But also at the same time, imagine if we drop the shura and the consultation between the Muslims. It's as devastating as leaving salah, as leaving the charity, and that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put it in the same ayah and put shura in the middle. European democracy is good because it has the mechanism, the voting mechanism, the succession of power, how people will exchange power, but at the same time, it's not that we vote over everything, it's not that we can change anything as we go and destroy society thinking that we're doing the right thing. And subhanAllah, just to wrap it up, there is a wonderful correct hadith of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. It's narrated by Umar ibn Khattab. It's a correct hadith. Wallahi, it's such an amazing hadith that one time I had a discussion with a priest. And the priest was so fascinated by the hadith. He said, I know it's Prophet Muhammad, but I would mention it in my sermon, in my church, because this is one of the biggest pieces of wisdom I ever heard in my whole entire life. It's about the difference and the relationship between individual rights and the rights of society, or the rights that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mandated for every one of us. The hadith goes that there was a ship in a river and there were people. فَاسْتَهَمُوا عَلَيْهَا. There were good people and bad people. So they made a kind of a toll, and then the good people were on the top of the ship and the bad people were at the bottom of the ship. So the people on the bottom of the ship, each time they want to get water for themselves, they would have to go to the top to get fresh water from the river, and by that bother the people up top. So they said to themselves, and listen to the language of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. They are at the bottom of the ship. لو أننا خرقنا في نصيبنا خرقا ما آذينا من فوقنا. If we make a hole at the bottom of the ship and get the water directly from the bottom of the ship, then we would not bother the people up there. And look at how Prophet Muhammad ﷺ put it. It's our part, it's where we occupy, the same way people tell you, it's my freedom, it's myself, I can do with myself whatever I want, forgetting that whatever sometimes he does affects everyone. So Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, لو أنهم تركوهم وما أرادوا, if they were left to dig a hole at the bottom of the ship, لهلكوا وهلكوا معهم. The people at the bottom will be the first to drown, the whole ship would drown, the people on the bottom and the people on the top. وَلَوْ أَخَذُوا عَلَىٰ أَيْدِيهِمْ لَنَجَوْا وَنَجَوْا جَمِيعًا. And if the people on top stopped him and prevented them from digging that hole in the bottom, not only the people up top would save themselves, but they would be saving the same people at the bottom at the same time. And here is the difference between Sharia law and when we say democracy, freedom, liberalism, and let's decide on everything, let's do whatever we want, and people wind up destroying themselves.